Thank you very much. Pete from the UK. In Paris, I felt a slight cultural shock, and I realised the extent that in the UK we live in a mature neoliberalised society, and many of the things that were being discussed reminded me of debates I had when I was younger and more militant, but I perhaps wasn't feeling in the same way. I've had exactly the same experience here today, and I'd like to thank you for re-exposing me to all the interesting ideas that are out there in society and helping me auto-critique the extent that my understanding of what is possible has been thoroughly neoliberalised in a mature neoliberal society. So thank you for that. I had the same experience when I've been to Argentina, looking at the experiences of the recuperated factories over there, and I think Andres has been way too polite, and he hasn't shared with you all the amazing experience in Argentina that there are. I can think of two recovered factories I've been to. IMPA in Buenos Aires, which I know has been going back to the 1950s, and it is a very open factory where there is production of the kind of materials we've just eaten our dinner off today, the kind of stainless steel food production. But there was a community market there. The workers there spoke to people in the community about what they were doing. They saw the community as a way of protecting their socialised property from the deprivations of the police. There was an art market in there. It was a vision of this factory in, say, or this space, I should say, not this factory. Thank you for the last comment. Understanding that this is a process of developing cooperative relations beyond just work. It was a vision of what this place could be in 20 or 30 years' time. Another example I went to was the Campochuelo print factory, which again was one of the battles against privatisation back in the 1990s. Very, very, very sophisticated print machinery, producing most of the official forms for the government of Buenos Aires, including driving licenses, that kind of thing. Bang up-to-date machinery, very well organised, but just as important, the social relations of the people producing in that place were so important to them. Coming back to a point that Marina made about thinking about the conditions of work. Spoke to one woman that was one of the workers there, and her job was to go through some of the produced material, doing checking, is it good enough quality? How boring if you're doing that in a capitalist enterprise where that's all you do all day in a post-Fordist machinery. But this was somebody that controlled the rate that she did it. She had the music that she wanted to listen to at the time. She spoke with the other people in the factory about what was going on there. She had autonomy over that area of work. It's very, very prosaic. It's about the practices of production, but it's really, really, really important that people in advanced manufacturing places like a printing works are still able to do that and make a living not only for themselves, but also for pensioners, for people who used to work there in a place where the pension system's been exploded. It shows a really, really interesting vision there. The other thing that's made me think that perhaps we might think about a little bit more, and I think some other people mentioned this, is there's the whole area of processes of commoning that are out there. That I think, given that we've had a very, very useful focus on recovered factories and recovered spaces, but I think we need to recognise that this is probably the hardest part of processes of commoning there is. You know, this place is marvellous, but when capitalist processes mean that we don't need sleeper trains anymore, it's quite difficult to organise against that on the basis of trying to keep work going. The comrades here are doing the right thing, recovering the space and thinking about new uses for this space, and that's right. But there are many examples of cooperatives which have developed in far more interesting, more favourable conditions. In the UK, because we are so much further along the process of neoliberalisation, if you spoke to many people, say in my city, Liverpool, about creating forms of work that are liberated and fulfilling and with dignity and provide ways to make a living, and you talk about cooperative factories, then you wouldn't really get that much of a hearing. I suspect it's the case in places like Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Romania. It's interesting for me that there's a gap in our experience here that we haven't heard from Eastern Central Europe here, where perhaps the language needs to be thought of in slightly different ways. And I'm reminded of Polanyi's distinction between the formal and the substantive economy. Even though economic theory might say that people are rational profit maximisers if they're in business, the reality is people set up all sorts of enterprises for all sorts of creative cultural reasons, and we need to understand that. So many people in the UK will be working in common collectively, but if you said, oh, you're working in common, they'd look at you like you were mad. But they are actually doing that. So perhaps we might want to look at sort of the 98% of enterprises out there, SMEs, and not think from a capitalocentric perspective, assuming these people are profit maximisers, because they're not. Think about entrepreneurialism in slightly different ways. Entrepreneurs create value. That can be for profit, which is kept by the entrepreneur, which obviously we want to challenge, but it can be created in all sorts of interesting ways. And then finally, I think I wanted to bring in with some of the experiences that I'd like to have and haven't had yet. I've just had them over the web, with the Brazilian experience, because I think that's really, really, really interesting, and it's a gap in our discussions here. The way that the Brazilians, under the ministry of Paul Singer, have worked with a lot of Brazil's technical universities to provide technical expertise to develop the solidarity economy in a way that is way ahead of anything we're doing in Europe here. So looking at this place here, I can imagine in Brazil a relationship with the engineering department that would come here and look at these amazing bogies here and say, well, what do we do with that in a technical sense? They would be thinking about marketing, not assuming that marketing is to sell for profit, but what are the techniques that you can use to get your stuff to the people who want to use it, not to make the maximum profit, but using some of those technical ideas. So don't have a capitalocentric view of the production process, don't have a capitalocentric view of marketing, get the technical expertise in here, work with student groups as projects. So we're starting to create in our students people that understand that their future is probably without a future unless they start to think in more creative ways going beyond a graduate job. And I think we would find a whole range of people out there that we could start to engage in a broader, non-capitalocentric way of looking at these things. Because I think if we focus, just assume that the whole world out there is capitalist and that it's closing us down and it's in crisis. A lot of it is. I'm not being naive, but I am saying there are other things out there as well. And we can focus on the more diverse Polanyian understandings of the way people make a living and look to do it in collective rather than individualistic ways. And we might find actually that there are a lot more actors out there that understand the crap we're going through and the inability of capitalism to provide them with a future, that we might be able to do something more interesting. And I hope that this is just the second of more conversations we're going to have, and that we could start to diversify the conversations into thinking about the broader ways of commoning going out there. And I thought the relationship to the reference to Uber from the last person was dead right, because that is a good example of an exploitative network that we need to be absolutely opposed to, but we need to be able to understand the difference between Uber and things like the Greek middleman movement, anti-middleman movement, which is building those kind of connections in more positive ways. So thinking about what's the difference between exploitative and non-exploitative networks. Thank you very much.